The U.S. Treasury says it has identified 4 members of an alleged Islamic State cell operating in South Africa. This comes just over a week after the U.S. warned of a possible terror attack in Sandton. Durban businessman Farhad Hoomer and 3 of his associates are accused of providing support to ISIS. Hoomer and 2 of the men were arrested in 2018 for being behind a series of bomb attacks in Durban. The U.S. Treasury has now imposed sanctions on the 4. This means they've been blocked from doing any business with interests in the U.S. For more, let's bring in eNCA U.S correspondent Simon Marks. Great to chat to you, Simon. Hopefully, or rather, we'd prefer it under different circumstances. But what do we know about this ISIS cell in Durban and the 4 individuals? Just to give our viewers an idea of their names: Nufail Akbar, Yunus Mohammed Akbar, Mohammed Akbar and Umar Akbar. What are they believed to have done or to be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, Annalie, to put this into a bit of context. Action was announced by the United States Treasury back in March of this year, sanctioning Farhad Hoomer, whom the United States has identified as an Islamic State ringleader, a recruiter, a logistical planner in South Africa for alleged activities that then can be exported to other parts of the continent. So he was sanctioned earlier in the year, and both the State Department and the Treasury are saying that this latest enforcement action comes pursuant to the inquiry that led to that earlier action being taken. So they say this builds on the March 2022 designations. Today they've named 2 brothers, Nufail Akbar and Yunus Mohammed Akbar, as senior members of an ISIS cell based, according to the United States, in Durban. They describe one of those brothers as the central commanding figure in the cell and the other as an enforcer and logistical coordinator. Then they're targeting 2 other people whom they claim are known ISIS associates, Mohammed Akbar and Umar Akbar. Those are the 2 men arrested back in 2018 in South Africa in connection with allegations that they were involved in deploying an incendiary device that was planned to explode near a mosque and some commercial retail buildings. Now, in addition to the action against those individuals, the United States is also sanctioning 8 separate South Africa-based companies that it claims are tied to these individuals and to Farhad Hoomer, the alleged organizer of this Islamic State cell. Some of them are general trading companies. One of them is a company that specializes in jewelry, another in waterproofing solutions, and one of them a gold trading company, also a construction company on the list. They too are now subject to these American sanctions.
Simon, tell us what these sanctions amount to in terms of preventing these individuals and companies from doing business not only with the US but here in South Africa, and for the individuals who perhaps unwittingly do business with them here.
Yeah, so as far as these individuals are concerned, these sanctions make them absolutely persona non grata from the perspective of the United States. Any assets that they may have in the United States will be frozen. They will be immediately unable to engage in any kind of financial transaction that even touches on the American banking system. Also, Americans will be banned from doing business with them. So the idea is to make their lives very difficult and to restrict their capacity to act, certainly with regards to the United States. But the United States making it clear that this action is being conducted under an allied global war on terrorism that the United States wages, and they'll be hoping that similar enforcement action is taken by friendly countries. They're also indicating here that they are going to leave it to the South African authorities, as they did back in 2018 when two of the men sanctioned today were originally arrested in South Africa, to deal with any criminal liability that may exist. All of that would proceed through South African legal channels. But as far as travel to the United States or any interaction officially with business entities in the United States is concerned, that's now off the table, banned by the Treasury as a result of this Office of Financial Assets Control enforcement action. I think it's probably important also to underscore, Annalie, we have no idea if there's any link between this move that's been taken here today and that security warning that was amplified and announced a few days ago by the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, not without controversy, of course, in South Africa itself. Whether there was anything tying that security alert to this enforcement action, we simply don't know.
As you said, controversy and certainly a fair amount of friction between the government of South Africa and the diplomatic ties to the U.S. South African's government saying that that warning was issued prematurely and without following the correct diplomatic channels before being released to South African citizens and causing what they described as panic. Do you know whether there have been any subsequent interactions between South Africa's government and the U.S. officials relating specifically to the designation of these four officials? I mean, sorry, the people.
We don't know about that. Yes, we don't know officially behind the scenes what kind of communication has taken place here. It would be unlikely, based on past American performance when sanctions enforcement action has been announced, for the South African government not to have been given some kind of advance notice that this was going to take place. And indeed, generally, the United States, when it is announcing sanctions enforcement action against residents of friendly countries, allies or partners, would provide those governments with advanced knowledge that this was coming. As to the broader relationship, I mean, President Ramaphosa, of course, was here in Washington just a few weeks ago for that meeting with President Biden at the White House that both sides essentially characterized as an opportunity to reset the relationship. And it was notable that within the last couple of days, the White House paid public tribute to the role that South Africa has played brokering the negotiations between the warring factions in Ethiopia. The White House going out of its way, as it put it, to applaud the government of South Africa for the role that it had played in bringing those negotiations to some kind of a conclusion. But certainly the fallout from that security alert issued by the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, seemingly without any advance notice being provided to the South African government, is a sting in the relationship and something that over time is going to have to be worked out.
Simon, here in South Africa, we have a fair share of problems and daily service delivery issues that perhaps take people's attention away from international issues. Very little daily talk of, for instance, ISIS. I think some South Africans might be surprised to know that there is an ISIS cell, or is alleged to be an ISIS cell here in Durban. What is America's view on South Africa, or the role that ISIS plays internationally still, its war on ISIS, and perhaps the activities of ISIS in South Africa?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, because here in the United States, of course, the Biden administration won't want to talk in too much detail about what ISIS is up to, particularly in terms of tentacles of the Islamic State that may have reached into South Africa and other parts of the African continent. Because remember, Joe Biden wants to tell the American electorate, and it's important to underscore, Annalie, that we are talking on the eve of all important midterm elections here tomorrow, that in many ways will seal Joe Biden's political fate for the next 2 years. We'll be talking about that tomorrow here on eNCA, Election Day, I'm sure of that. You know, reminding the American voters that after Afghanistan and the US military withdrawal, which was very botched as the Americans went about their departure from Afghanistan, reminding Americans that that did create fresh instability, because it has allowed Islamic State and some of its proxy organizations to regroup, with some Islamic State officials absolutely finding safe haven in Kabul and in Afghanistan as they continue to try and work on some kind of a comeback with multinational aspirations to boost not just their membership but expand their influence and potentially engage in terrorist organization. All of that kind of runs counter to the Biden administration's narrative that the war in Afghanistan was successfully wrapped up, and over the horizon national security approaches can protect Americans and friendly nations from the threat that ISIS poses. So it is interesting, the timing of this announcement on the eve of midterm elections here. I suspect it won't secure much coverage, if any, on America's nightly news programs here. South Africa and ISIS not at the forefront of the public's mind collectively at the moment as we head into election season. But there's no question it does serve as a reminder that in some parts of the world, Islamic State, according to the Americans, is not just operational, but absolutely still a threat to US personnel and US interests.
Simon, we're going to require a lot of your time tomorrow to bring us regular updates on those midterm elections in the US, so we'll let you go and get some rest. Thank you very much. Simon Marks, our correspondent in Washington, D.C., bringing us that report about an ISIS cell operating supposedly from Durban.